Hi, I'm Mal from the Money Study, bringing you another episode of our Take 10 Challenge. And here we are up to number 103, part 12 of Buying an Investment Property series. And this one's all about granny flats and perhaps utilising your property for Airbnb. There's our disclaimer: facts and figures, information only, nothing to do with advice. Okay, granny flats. I like this idea. This is effectively where we're looking at an investment property, but instead of going out and purchasing a standalone investment property, be it an apartment or a house or whatever it may be, we're actually utilising our own land to build our investment property on our own premises. The advantage, of course, of building a little granny flat at the back and either renting it out on a long-term lease or using it for Airbnb or whatever the case may be, means that we're generating income from our existing land. And of course, this is saving us money. Generally, there is little or no land tax involved, depending on the state and territory that you're in, as to whether you need to be paying an extra tax for the fact that you've got this property on the back of your already existing property. So what we're doing is we're taking advantage of what you've already got, because as we know, the expensive part of buying a property is indeed the land. Now, of course, we've got this issue of capital growth, and if it's on your existing property, is the existing property going up overall, and what does it mean to your overall property by having this investment property on it? You would only normally expect that when you come to sell the property, that having an income generating asset on the property would be an advantage for some. Other people may not like to have that other building on there, so it may, there's pros and cons obviously when it comes to sell as to the advantage of having this extra building on your property. But of course, it means that we've got a lot of flexibility with this property, because it could be that we initially build the granny flat and rent it out and derive income from it, but with the thought pattern that later on it will become a granny flat where one of our parents or so forth may be moving into it. We can look after them. Or it could be a case that we move into the granny flat as we get older and our kids perhaps are living in the house looking after us. Who knows what the future is indeed going to bring us. But it gives us a bit of flexibility there between investment and being a practical advantage for the family situation. It could mean that our children actually move out of the house and move into the granny flat to give us a bit of space, and then they perhaps pay rent if it's something they could afford to do, rather than sharing our own house. So I'll say a few little ideas there as far as it could work well for the family situation, as well as deriving a bit of extra income there. Building the property would be, generally speaking, reasonably cheap in comparison to purchasing a block of land and building a property on it, simply because we don't already have to buy the land, and that's the bit that can be very, very expensive to do. So if our costs are down, so our purchase price of this investment property is down, then effectively we're getting a higher yield, meaning that if whatever rent we get from this granny flat, in comparison to the cost of putting it together, we're actually getting a pretty reasonable rate of return. And there's a company here in Canberra. I'm not promoting anybody, but this company, Granny Flats, basically came and they brought along a big book of all the different designs and effectively showing me the expected yield that you would get from these things, and they were certainly a lot higher than the yield that you would get from a standalone property. So if we can get a higher yield, it means we've got a bigger percentage income coming in for what we've spent. This is helping us to get it into effectively a positively geared situation pretty much straight away. and therefore we're not relying on capital growth so much. It does indeed become an income generating thing. So this can indeed be quite good for a retirement situation where we're getting a positive yield, we're getting an income generating. It hasn't cost us a lot of money in comparison to setting it all up. And it could even mean that by doing this, we've actually got less maintenance in the regard that it's on the property, and therefore, our backyard has been, we don't need to worry about mowing it anymore. There's actually a house on it, and the person renting it would be responsible just for keeping it neat and tidy. So, yes, there's a property to maintain. That could be expensive depending on what we've done there. But generally speaking, if it's a new build, we would hope that the maintenance level and costs would indeed be reasonably low there. It's probably easier to maintain, obviously, in the regard that it's outside your back door, so we're not having to travel to do it. But of course, it could be a case that as we get older, that may be simpler just to get someone to come and look after it anyway. Privacy, yeah, look, do we really want to have another, building and someone living on our backyard? The way these things can be built these days, it certainly can be. I've seen some very, very clever designs with screening and fencing and so forth, just the way that they're situated so we're not looking into each other's windows. So it can be done, but of course it does mean that they've got to get access to it. You may have people driving up a driveway next to your house, all those things which you're not mad keen on, but it just comes down to obviously the design of the property, the layout of your existing property as to what that would really mean and what impact that would really do upon you. And of course the downside may be offset by the income that this thing is generating. But have a talk to one of these companies that specialise in granny flats. You'd be amazed at the cost, the yield, and some of the very, very classy designs that they can do without sort of really dragging down the overall look of your property and impinging upon your lifestyle. But it can indeed be quite a reasonable way of generating some income utilising our existing property. The other way to use our existing property, of course, is utilising what we've already got, perhaps, as an Airbnb. Not saying we couldn't use our granny flat as an Airbnb. It doesn't have to be a long-term rental. Or for our kids, it could be that we just built this place literally to do an Airbnb, and that's fine. Anecdotally, people are making more money from Airbnb than they are from long-term rental. It just means that obviously a little bit more work involved in doing that, because we've got to take into account, cleaning, advertising, all the effort required in checking in and checking out, and any hassles involved in just the daily grind of having new people arrive and leave all the time. A little bit different than having a long-term tenant that you get to know and trust and so forth. But just make sure before you go down this path of Airbnb, it sounds wonderful, but there are quite a few requirements as a host that you need to do to ensure that your property's up to standard, the sort of services that you need to provide as a host. So just make sure you understand all those. And of course, it comes down to you understanding the safety and security, not just for them, but for you. Nothing worse than perhaps having an Airbnb than finding out it's a bunch of kids, doing a 21st birthday party or something like that. So, just understanding how all that works. But normally a better daily rate from a Airbnb, but certainly more hassles involved to get that extra money. It's just that offset. More money, more hassles effectively from that situation there. Hosts are charged, generally speaking, around about 3% of the total amount earned for every booking on Airbnb. So that's a cost that you've got to understand, that you may be charging more, but you're losing a portion of it to the actual provider of the app or the service. And of course, it's not just Airbnb. There's a whole string of these people now. So probably just do a comparison and look at some of the reviews and so forth, just to get an idea of who people are using these days and what sort of costs involved of the various different platforms. So, yeah, look, it's something. It might be worthwhile talking to someone who's been doing it to get an idea of just the anecdotally, the hassles involved in doing it. And obviously some properties would be far, far easier to do as an Airbnb. As you can imagine, a standalone granny flat with a sort of self-serve entry where they can just use a keypad to get in, so you don't have to be there to provide them with keys and so forth. A lot easier, of course, than if you're using an existing bedroom or a rumpus room or whatever it may be as your Airbnb. Some houses are far more practical to be set up as an Airbnb arrangement than others, where they've obviously got a separate part to the house, a separate entranceway, other separate bedrooms, bathrooms, and all those sort of things. So it comes down to the location, the setup of your own house, and probably you'll know what you're prepared to put up with from that point of view. But certainly something that can be, should be considered if you're looking at how to use your own house to generate a little bit of extra income. Remembering that extra income can impinge on things like your age pension, ability to get age pension, simply because of the extra income that it generates. And of course, then we've got also other issues in regarding to claiming tax deductions, but also when you come to sell your house, if you've been generating money from your own house, we have capital gains issues as well. So just make sure you talk to your accountant or a tax agent before you jump into this to understand what records you would need to keep, what the actual impact would be if you are indeed looking to sell your own home in a few years or whatever down the track. So it's got like anything with these sort of investments, got some good pros, but there are cons as well. Make sure you understand before you jump in. Happy if you had to come and have a chat to us. Look forward to you joining me in the next session.